everyone, and welcome to the EVOLVE Voices podcast, a platform to hear about the fascinating stories behind the people that power global commerce. I am Mayssa Nasr, a marketing and growth consultant, and I am your MENA region host of EVOLVE Voices. What does it take to lead through complexity, inspire transformation, and build sustainable success across industries, cultures, and continents? In this episode of EVOLVE Voices, I'm joined by someone who embodies all of that and even more. Carine Assouad. Carine is a true powerhouse in the world of business transformation and venture capital. She's a Lebanese leader based in Dubai today, and she brings decades of international experience driving shareholder value, restructuring companies, and mentoring founders to help them scale with purpose and precision. She has held several roles with large companies, and today she leads post-investment strategy at IM Capital too. So whether you're a founder, investor, or simply passionate about growth and resilience, this episode is for you. Carine, welcome to the EVOLVE Voices podcast, and thank you for accepting my invitation.
Of course, it's a pleasure to be here, Mayssa.
So Carine, let's start from the beginning. How did your journey actually begin, and what drew you into the world of business transformation and venture capital?
Well, nobody wakes up one morning and says, "I want to do a transformation."
Yeah.
It's a whole journey, and mine is a journey that's very diverse, not to say all over the place. But it was always driven by curiosity and the need to always learn, be stimulated, not to get bored, and to work with interesting people on stimulating challenges. So my journey started 20 plus years ago as a graphic designer, nothing to do with the world of transformation. Then I shifted into consulting. I was at Arthur D. Little and then BCG, the Boston Consulting Group in Paris and New York, where I was mostly focused on learning how to manage under turbulence in a turbulent environment, so under uncertain times. And talking about uncertain time, I moved into entrepreneurship, which was by far the most humbling experience of my life. Got back to Lebanon, met a former colleague who suggested we develop a turnaround practice, so Albert Costagnon at Levant Consult. And we did that for large family businesses in Lebanon. And a former client called me and said, I invested in this company. Why don't you help? And this is how the VC journey started. So it was a lot of opportunistic decisions, just saying yes to things that just sounded right and were exciting to me.
Nice. And so you specialize today in turnaround and operational excellence, right? So if you are to choose the top 3 signs a company needs today to be restructured or to be redirected, what will these 3 signs be?
It's not really 3 signs, right? Give me any company and I can sell you a turnaround project. I can sell you a restructuring project. I can help you pinpoint the areas in which you can, do things differently, try to disrupt, shake things around and be better. But if I were to sum it down or to boil it down to 3 things, it's whenever you have a change of leadership. One of the most common projects that we do is the first 90 days of a CEO. It's a very known methodology by Atkins on basically saying, and this is what presidents do usually, saying that your first 90 days or 100 days in office are the most impactful. They set your credibility, they set the tone of your mandate, they help you prioritize. And helping a leader really think through this period is always a critical one and a very structured one. And then you have 2 other factors, one internal. So whenever, something doesn't work, and usually numbers say that. So whenever you have any kind of financial duress and you have an imminent bankruptcy, when the numbers are no longer making sense. So whenever you have an internal problem that is starting to show and that you're able to pinpoint. And the third would be whenever then there's an external factor, such as a major market disruption, a newcomer, new technology, a competitor that is doing things differently, pressure on margin, tariffs. So all these things that are happening that are sometimes outside your control, but that deeply impact and disrupt your work.
Okay, interesting. And so what were some, very pivotal moments in your career that defined your current approach to business and growth? Do you have some, things or events you can talk about or you can remember?
So the way I look at my career path was really twofold. So I had the first fold that was really consulting, where you learn structure, you learn methodologies, you learn discipline. It's really on a cognitive level, just like school. You learn so many things. It's so formative, really formative years. And then there's the entrepreneurial period that teaches you to be adaptive, to be resilient, to be smart, to be, to have an EQ, not only an IQ. That also teaches you so much humility, because you also need to, you're a jack of all trades. You have to kind of do a bit of everything. You understand the complexity of all the different roles. So I think this is what's really helping me today in my advisory roles with large corporations, is that it's not a consultant that, just gives theoretical advices or just looks at numbers and, gives a plain strategy or a conceptual strategy. It's also someone who has been there, who knows that it's complex to implement, that understand the difficulties, that can really find something that is conceptually right, but also that works operationally. So I think these two periods of my life complement each other quite well. They were extremely different and they brought me so many different things, but they kind of helped me have a more rounded approach to consulting today.
And can you walk us through a turnaround project that you are particularly proud of?
Yep.
Any project?
Yeah. All turnaround projects I'm proud of, because by design, a turnaround project is something that where everything's critical. Time is critical, money is critical, people are so tensed. So all turnaround projects are very minute, and you have to be you cannot drop a ball not once, it's really, you're always on your toes. But there is one that is definitely harder than all others. It was a turnaround project, not even the biggest one, in Lebanon. But first of all, it was a family business. Family business, in essence, are 10 times more complicated than others, because you have all this emotional tension and, the families, the wives, all of this drama that comes with it. Second of all, it was a really tough project. There was an instance of fraud, that was imminent bankruptcy, imminent seizing of assets, including vital equipment or vital assets of the company. So it was really tough. And last but not least, it happened in Lebanon during the financial crisis, when you had a currency devaluation. You had to book like 3 currencies. The exchange rate was changing every day. We had a macro that, goes from your budget to the Sairafa, for those who know it, the platform, which is a platform that changes the rate daily. It was insane, really. It was really blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but it was also definitely one of the most exciting projects to work on.
Carine, I'm curious to know, at the beginning, how were you actually selling yourself, to you just, take up these challenges and do like turnarounds?
I'm very lucky. I was actually thinking about this with my partner last time. It's been 15 years that I haven't approached anyone. Just there's a lot of people who speak, who talk to each other. There's a few people who do what we do. So also, I think there's the bouche à oreille, so the referral type of mechanism that plays quite well.
The word of mouth, yeah.
Word of mouth, exactly. That is really helping. But I think it takes one good, deep discussion with a CEO to convince them. So just give me a CEO, give me a P&L, let me drill down into it, and let's have a discussion. And it either clicks or it doesn't, because the way we do things is very straightforward. Usually you don't have time. You really have to cut through the bullshit. You have to cut through the noise and just get it done. So it works with some, it doesn't with others. And very quickly, both of you. So really, I think I was very lucky to always have like return customer, repeat customer, and or referrals that allowed me to always have a pipeline. But if not, I think just, going and having a chat, very blunt, real talk type of chat with the CEO would get the job done.
Okay. And I can imagine that you have CEOs that are easier than others, right? And some of them might, resist to change. So what's your approach when stepping into a business that needs change, but you have, the board of directors or the CEOs that, are very resistant to change?
A good glass of wine, first and foremost. Because you're going to have this, you have to be, very zen. So for those of you who don't drink, it's like a 5-minute meditation. But yes, you definitely have this. It's twofold. First of all, I think what really helps is being very clear, very transparent, communicating very often and very succinctly and clearly so that people, especially, I rarely have resistance from CEO. It really usually is middle management, that's afraid for their job, rightfully so, that's afraid for their career, their future. So whenever you give them clarity and you tell them, this is how we're going to go about this, whenever you explain that whenever possible, you're going to help support and do, follow the values of the company and be respectful of their job and their time with the company. And whenever you manage expectations, resistance will drop. The upside in a turnaround project compared to a regular consulting project is really they don't have a choice. Neither the board, nor the CEO, nor the management. By the time they come to us, if they don't do something, they're all dead. They're dead in the waters and they know it. So by the time they come to us, this kind of resistance, they resisted and now they have no other choice. So really what we try to do is to minimize the pain of it all and to be very respectful of the people and, again, the assets of the company, the people of the company, everybody, so that we make sure that we're doing it in the cleanest possible way.
Okay. And what's your usual strategy? Do you do like one-on-one interviews with, middle management and directors, or you directly start working, on the strategy? How do you do it?
It depends on the level of urgency. Sometimes, again, like the project I was telling you about, you're going to have potentially a bank coming to seize asset tomorrow. So you prioritize, you leave strategy and doing nice business plans for later, and it's really survival mode. So you shift to survival mode, you attend to the highest priority, most critical tasks first. It's a lot of firefighting. And then you plan. But before being able to plan, you need to survive. So really, whenever you're in survival mode, it's not necessarily about having the discussions and having the talks. It's, okay, how do I give myself at least 1 month of survival so that I can have those discussions? And then the discussion with middle management, the discussion with all stakeholders, not only middle management, from clients to supplier to middle management to top management to shareholder to former employees, depending on the case, is really key, because you don't want to have a biased view on what's happening. You really need to understand the real issue, the real problem. And when you're able to define the real problem, 90% of the problem is solved, when you understand where it's coming from and not the perception of where it's coming from. But to get there, you need to stabilize first.
And usually, how long does it take to stabilize?
Stabilize, again, depends a lot on the size of the company, on how fast and reactive the leadership is, how collaborative they are, the industry and the company. So how agile is it? Especially in the Middle East, we have a lot of old family businesses that are a bit more mammoth style, that are a bit inert. Mm-hmm. But to stabilize, you need to do it very quickly. You have 1 to 3 months. A full turnaround project usually takes 18 to 2 years. So a turnaround, which is really taking a company from the red or from a situation that's not viable or at least not appealing to a growth situation. And in our case, we do a lot of turnaround in order to exit or to sell. So taking it from a situation where it's at risk to a situation where it's appealing to potential investors takes 18 months to 2 years.
Okay, good to know. So let's talk actually about your post-investment strategy. So you are leading, right, the post-investment strategy at IM Capital. What do you think is the most underestimated part of supporting startups post-funding? Okay, so first let me just make it clear to whomever is seeing that this is a second type of job that I do. It has nothing to do with turnaround. So this is turnaround I do with big, large corporate offices or family offices or big, large corporation. Startups is, on the contrary, something that's bubbly and fun and small and exciting. And I would say today, if I were to think of an area where I feel we add value for a startup, it's being this kind of very honest sounding board, not an investor that's like, hammering them for numbers, not, somebody who's going to put too much pressure because they're under a lot of pressure already. I say that most of the time, my job is to be a cheerleader and just be like, trying to help them to find solution, helping them see the end of the tunnel. The workload is so heavy. The stress for an entrepreneur is so heavy that sometimes they start being so tensed and stressed and they kind of forget about the bigger picture. So just having someone who reminds them of the big goal, reminds them that they're not alone, is a big chunk of my... And do you, from the beginning, help them think about the end?
So one of the things that I'm seeing in the region that I didn't see when I was working in the US was exactly that. So I feel that there's a blind spot because in the US, people think about what do I want to do? What do I want to build? But also they think from the beginning, so how am I planning to fund this and who or how would I want to exit? So what would be a good exit for me? Is it, selling to an institutional player? Is it selling to someone from the industry? Is it keeping it and making a lot of money? Is it going public? So they have a very good understanding of the whole journey because it's something that's been there for longer. In the Middle East, we just, or at least most of the time, we think about what do I want to build? And we kind of forget about this kind of before and building the real infrastructure and the foundation that are going to help you be sustainably good. And the after, so who am I or who is my target in terms of exit? Because you don't build it the same way, whether you want to build it to a strategic investor or to somebody from the industry or go public. So I think this is definitely something that in the Middle East, and I'm seeing that change a lot. To be fair, I do see that it's changing a lot, but historically it's something where we did have a blind spot.
Okay. And the Middle East and the MENA region as a whole is very volatile, right? The markets are very volatile. So do you have like a certain framework for helping startups scale sustainability in such a volatile market?
So we do have a lot of trainings on crisis management, even more than volatility itself. So by trade, as I was saying before, and when I was a consultant, I was specialized in managing uncertainty. We really looked, for instance, at the time at the army strategy. You don't really know what's going to happen. So we really looked at what they do, how they do it differently. And we try to help our startups with that. So yes, crisis management. And during a crisis, for me, it's really being able to forecast it or see it ahead of time, to be very clear on what you want to do when the crisis hit. So to be prepared beforehand, because it's much easier to have a plan when you are cold-headed, when you know when you can think, rather than doing the plan once shit hits the fan, right? Or when the crisis is here. So we help them preemptively kind of define the scenarios of a crisis, define how they would like to answer it, really be clear with their team also during the crisis on how they're going to go about it and communicate well, and come out of it even stronger. So a lot of the startups that went through the crisis in Lebanon, again, we're going back to Lebanon, learned a lot, did think differently, pivoted because they had to, and ended up coming out of it even stronger. So you need to be able to weather this change and be very nimble, very fast and agile.
And you talked about, some, founders having this blind spot that is changing now about the exit strategy. But what other blind spots do you see founders have today in the region?
Again, I would go back to this funding journey and this exit journey. I don't feel that they have blind spot or that they're behind on any major topic. On the contrary, the founders or the startups that I work with, they're impressive on so many levels. They have such a diverse background. They have a rich experience. They have a personality that's just amazing because they came from an environment that's so complex and rich and diverse. So again, for me, working with the founders here has been so much more enjoyable than maybe in the US. So I don't really feel that there's a blind spot as much as an immaturity when it comes to the whole journey of a startup. I feel that they don't have a blindness, but maybe the infrastructure itself is not necessarily as developed, as mature as in other countries. So for instance, if we were to go to funding, in any other market, you would have 10 ways to fund the startups. In the Middle East, it's mostly through equity. So you end up having founders that are giving up way too much equity way too soon. So these kind of things that are more linked to the infrastructure rather than them having a blind spot are areas that we should be working on.
Okay. Carine, I'm curious to know, how do you choose which companies to support?
So I used to say yes to everything, but which was draining. Now I think since having a kid, your time becomes much more precious, and I'm sure you feel the same way. So it became very important to find companies where I know I can really add value. So I'm not here just for them to have a woman on the board or to have, so I really can add value because for me, I thrive out of creating impact, out of, having a real impact on a startup or on an industry. Second of all, whether I enjoy working with the people. It's really a lot about who you're doing this with. Is it somebody who's inspiring, who you like, who's open to feedback, who's also going to challenge you? So I think it's a lot about the fit, my capacity to impact, and whether or not I can deliver value.
Okay. You talked very quickly about women being part of a board. I want to
Yeah.
touch just on this point. How do you think women today in leadership are changing the business landscape in MENA today?
I think they change it just by existing, really. Because I remember when I was a consultant, that was 20 years ago at the beginning. There weren't so many women at the top, and I didn't have a role model. Or if I did have a role model, it were women who at the time needed to kind of mimic men to succeed. So they had, very short hair, pantsuits, they were very abrupt in the way they spoke. And things are changing. Before, to succeed, it was already very difficult to succeed, so they have a lot of merit, but they kind of needed to act like a man, okay, to man up, literally to man up. Today, seeing women succeed as women with their differences while really showing off, dressing up differently, acting differently, embracing their differences, embracing the way they do business or they think that might be slightly different from other counterparts. This has a role of representation that is huge for future generations. And then women at the top can change it, because whenever they have access to decision making, whenever they're decision makers, there's the head of people at PwC in Dubai, for instance, that made it a point to ensure that fertility is covered and IVF treatment are covered, and screening the breast cancer screening are done very early on. Whenever you have women that reach a decision making position, they can make the workplace more woman friendly, because my vision of feminism is not saying that we're the same, as acknowledging that we're different, we have different needs at different times, we can have it all but not at the same time, and that we need to adjust the marketplace and the office and this whole industry or the whole work to fit the way women work. And when you have women that get there, they need to ease the way for other.
Nice. And are the founders you're working with today are mainly men or women?
Mainly men, because just by the nature of things, there are much more male founders than female founders. I have a lot of female founders, but first of all, funnily enough, they're often co-founders that, rather than solo founders. And as a percentage, even though we're really pushing for female representation, they're still underrepresented for sure.
Okay. Carine, what advice do you find yourself giving the most to founders and CEOs? Do you have like one advice that you find yourself giving it?
I don't give the
Everyone?
same to founders and CEOs. So to founders, and I think anybody who's worked with me is gonna smile when hearing this, I always say the world is full of amazing products that nobody uses. And as a founder, you spend so much time refining the solution and twisting this and tweaking this and whatever, that by the time you need to sell your product and put it on the market and go towards the client, you're exhausted, and you have this kind of vision of what you want it to be, and you go into the nitty gritty details of it. You go into kind of this funnel of overthinking it and tweaking, rather than thinking, okay, let me put it in front of a customer. Let's have A/B testing. Let's see how they react to it, and let me iterate as I go. So I think this for a founder is definitely, helping them take a step back and kind of say, okay, this is good enough. Let me try now, and I'll iterate as I go. To CEOs, and again, they're going to smile when hearing this, I always remind them of the two levers of a CEO. I tell them that you have two levers. You either pick the quality of the solution or the speed of the solution. And it's impossible to have both. And you always have CEOs that are, these kind of meticulous CEOs that are going to want to overthink every single decision, or the speed, CEOs that want to do everything tomorrow and have it ready today and have it ready and just like go with the flow and follow his gut. And just reminding them that this strategy doesn't work. You really have to be what we call at BCG ambidextrous, and really decide where to go deep and where to go fast is one of the most critical piece of advice I can give. And now it's funny because CEOs would be like, okay, quality of the solution over speed of the solution. So it became kind of the running joke, but it really serves a.
These are very nice advices. Thank you. Carine, if you could fix one misconception about growth, about business transformation, what would it be? Are there misconceptions actually?
Oh my God, so many. So about both, I would say that people just expect it to be a linear, just a line, a linear growth, a linear transformation, just a linear improvement, whereas it's an up and down type of roller coaster type of thing. And it gets so discouraging when you're in the down. But, if you're in the mindset that it's fine, I'm going to turn this down around and I can make it up again and it's going to take time and I really have to be on my toes all the time. These are the CEOs and the startups that work. Those who understand that you're going to have hiccups along the way and that make sure that they're able to motivate their team and keep the momentum despite a hard launch or a hard quarter or a product that didn't do as well as expected. It's this resilience to turbulence, this resilience to downs, to failures, and the capacity to bounce back that makes the best leaders, I think.
And what drives you today? What's behind all this passion? What keeps you curious and engaged despite, your extensive experience?
I think, well, as you said, I'm curious and I want to learn. I think when you get to your 40s, you run the risk of becoming obsolete if you don't really learn and keep on being surrounded by people who are going to pull you up, make you re-question what you know, what you think. This pursuit of perpetual learning and perpetual stimulation is definitely something that I have in me. And I mean, my family, we kind of all have this kind of drive. And yeah, I think it's innate. It's something that I have in me. And I feel that I work a lot in F&B, so in food and beverage, and there's so many disruptions in this industry and in all industries, really. I mean, if you look at some industries that are near to my heart, like fintech, edtech, health tech, F&B, there's so many disruptions that are happening because of, changes of leadership everywhere, because of AI, because of tech changes, because of the way we do work, is different and is changing all the time. There's so much happening that for a problem solver like me, it's like it's Christmas. It's just like a lot of small events that I'm looking forward to think about and to solve and to find a solution to.
What's one piece of advice that you have received early on in your career that still guides you today?
So there's one I learned early and one I learned later. So the first one I learned early, I always tell the joke about my first evaluations at BCG. The summary was Carine doesn't know how to say no, should learn. The second one, 3 months later, was Carine learn how to say no, should say it less often. And I think for me, the power of no became a guiding principle in my life because especially as women, I think we have a tendency to say yes, to want to help, to want to support, sometimes at your own expense, at the expense of your life, at the expense of your family, etc. So having the luxury to say no to annoying client, annoying project, annoying colleagues, to things that don't bring me joy or where I don't bring impact has been transformational. And the second is something my sister always says, is just surround yourself with people who fill your bucket. And by that, she means your energy bucket. So people who don't deplete your energy, people who are going to be supportive, who are going to be upbeat, who are going to bring joy and positive energy. And, you with your big smile is definitely one of them. But, these there are people that are solar, they go into a room and they just bring positive energy, and learning to kind of put the other ones in a box and deal with them when you're capable of dealing with them and not, not having them impact you has been also quite important for me as a learning.
Carine, what's next for you?
It's a big question. I had a baby 18 months ago. We're trying for a second. So it is definitely an important question for me at the moment to say, okay, obviously something's got to give. So how am I looking at the future? What do I want to prioritize? And I definitely want to keep the stimulation going, but maybe doing it with one client or fewer projects rather than being so scattered is something that I'm looking forward to, and looking for rather advisory positions in industries with high disruption and with interesting people. So as blurry as it sounds, but we'll take it day by day.
Carine, I have two last questions for you. The first one is actually about motherhood. What did motherhood change in your life, in your professional life?
One thing, I value time much more. So nothing changed for me except the fact that when you go into this meeting that could have been an email, you just leave. You just leave. You're like, I could be spending this time where I'm adding no value, where people should have come prepared. I could have spent it with my son. And, I politely, and now the teams know me enough for me to say, you know what, I think we're not prepared for this meeting. Let's get there. Send me some information by email, and then we'd reconnect for a shorter meeting. But these kind of lengthy thing where people like to hear themselves speak, I'd rather be reading Busy Bear to my son.
Yes.
So this is the only thing that changed for me, the value of time.
Okay, interesting. And
The value of sleep, the second thing. Two things.
if you have one book to recommend actually to all our listeners today, what
You
book would
asked
that
me
be?
this question. I knew I had to prepare for this, and I had a really tough time picking one. So allow me to give three quickly. So the
Okay.
first is The Hard Thing About the Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, which is a zero bullshit type of approach to managing your company. The second, and it's from my mentor Martin Reeve at the Strategy Institute. It's Your Strategy Needs a Strategy, and he just launched a new book which is Like the Button That Changed the World. So these are really books that are going to help you think from a higher standpoint about your strategy, your future. And last but not least, because we're in the MENA chapter, I definitely recommend people to read Coming of Age by Noor Swed. Noor is the founding partner at Global Ventures, and she invested in probably every single successful startup that exists in the Middle East. And these are a set of discussions with founders. So it's very true. It resonates with every founder, and I really recommend it. It's an amazing read.
Amazing. Karine, one last thing. If people want to connect with you, how do they do it? On LinkedIn? Is there any website? How do they, just connect with you?
So they can definitely connect on LinkedIn, so Carine Assouad on LinkedIn. And they can also join an empowering tribe called, the empowering tribe that was launched by my sister, which is for female founders and female entrepreneurs. They can join. It's a community of women that want to learn and that is supporting each other. It's really an amazing network and communities. Would be very happy to have new people join.
Great. Thank you, Karine. Thanks a lot for your time. I
Of
know that you
course.
value time now, so thanks a lot. Thank you. And for all our listeners, thank you for tuning in up until the end. And as usual, keep evolving.
Now make sure you subscribe to Evolve Voices, this leading and incredible project where our ambassadors are interviewing amazing professionals from all over the world so they can share their perspective and benefit you with their perspective, their knowledge, and you can understand what's happening in the different markets. Evolve Voices is a project part of the Evolve Commerce Club, the #1 and leading community where we connect international professionals in the world of commerce. We are now connecting professionals in more than 40 markets, and every week we invite an expert to share their perspective and their knowledge. So if you'd like to know more, you can always look at the comments. We have a link there so you can request your application and stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks for watching. All the best. Ciao.